The desert did not whisper to everyone. It chose its listeners carefully, like an ancient storyteller deciding who was worthy of its truths. To most, it was only endless and golden, silent, and merciless beneath the ruthless sun. But to Fazza, the desert had always spoken in a language she could almost understand. Almost. She stood at the edge of the dunes as twilight melted into the horizon, her black abaya dancing lightly in the warm evening wind. The sky above her was a slow-burning canvas, amber dissolving into violet, then into a deep, endless blue. The world behind her was made of marble walls, crystal chandeliers, and guarded gates. The world before her was something else entirely, vast, untamed, and strangely familiar. Fazza had grown up in silence, but not the peaceful kind. Hers was a silence filled with unasked questions and carefully avoided answers. Her life inside the palace had always felt like a beautifully decorated cage. People spoke around her, never to her. Decisions were made for her, never with her. Even her smiles had been rehearsed, practiced in mirrors until they became second nature. But the desert never asked her to pretend. The first time she heard it, she was 9 years old. She had wandered too far during a family gathering held at a private desert camp. The adults were busy with laughter and politics, the children distracted by games and sweets. Fazza, however, had followed a drifting trail of wind-blown sand beyond the lantern-lit tents. She remembered the exact moment it happened. The wind had risen suddenly, curling around her like invisible fingers. The air had grown thick, not suffocating, but alive. And then, for a fleeting second, she had heard something. Not a voice. Not quite. More like a memory she had never lived. She had run back that day, her small heart racing with confusion and fear. When she tried to tell her mother, she was met with a gentle smile and a dismissive touch. "It's just the wind, Fazza," her mother had said. But Fazza knew better. Years passed, but the feeling never left her. The desert called to her in quiet moments when the palace halls grew too still, when the weight of expectation pressed too heavily against her chest. It wasn't loud. It didn't demand. It waited. And Fazza, no matter how hard she tried, always found herself listening. Now, at 23, she had returned to that same desert alone this time. No guards followed her, no watchful eyes lingered nearby. For the first time in her life, she had chosen something for herself. The wind rose again. It brushed against her face, soft at first, then insistent. Her breath caught slightly as that familiar sensation returned, the strange awareness that she was not alone, even in the emptiness. "You came back," a voice echoed within her mind. Fazza froze. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She turned sharply, scanning the dunes behind her, but there was no one. Only endless waves of sand, shifting gently beneath the fading light. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. No answer. Only the wind. She exhaled slowly, trying to convince herself it was nothing, that it was just memory playing tricks on her. But deep down, she knew this was different. This wasn't a childhood imagination resurfacing. This was real. The wind circled her again, stronger now, lifting grains of sand into the air. They didn't sting her skin as they should have. Instead, they moved around her, as if guided by something unseen. Fazza closed her eyes. And that's when she saw it. Flashes. Not dreams, visions. A woman standing in the same desert, her face hidden behind a veil, her eyes filled with something that looked like both sorrow and power. A symbol carved into stone. A fire burning under a moonless sky. And a voice clear this time. The secret was never buried. It was written, and you were meant to read it. Fazza's eyes snapped open. The wind died instantly, as if someone had silenced it. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her mind struggling to catch up with what she had just experienced. The images lingered, sharp and vivid, refusing to fade like ordinary thoughts. What secret? She whispered into the stillness. No reply came. But something had changed. She could feel it in the air, in the ground beneath her feet, in the quiet space inside her chest that had once been filled with uncertainty. That space was no longer empty. It was waiting. Fazza looked out across the dunes, her gaze steady now, no longer hesitant. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of the desert. She was drawn to it. And somewhere deep within the shifting sands, something ancient had begun to awaken, something that had been waiting not just for anyone, but for her. The desert did not return to silence after that night. It watched. Fazza could feel it in ways she could not explain, not with words, not with logic. The air itself seemed aware of her presence, as if every grain of sand carried memory, and every breath she took awakened something long forgotten. She did not return to the palace immediately. Instead, she walked deeper into the desert, guided not by direction, but by instinct. The moon had risen fully now, casting silver light over the dunes, turning the golden sea into something almost otherworldly. Shadows stretched and curled like ancient calligraphy written across the earth. And somehow, she understood that she was being led. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time no longer felt real here. Then she saw it. At first, it looked like nothing more than a distortion in the sand, a slight dip between dunes. But as she moved closer, the shape revealed itself: ruins. Half buried, weathered by centuries of wind, yet still standing with quiet defiance. Fazza's heart began to race again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was recognition. "I've been here before," she whispered. But she knew that wasn't possible. Or was it? The wind stirred gently, as if answering her unspoken question. This time, it didn't swirl wildly, it moved with purpose, gliding toward the ruins like a guide. Fazza followed without hesitation. The entrance was narrow, almost hidden. Stone pillars, cracked and worn, framed a passage leading underground. Symbols were carved into them, intricate, unfamiliar, yet strangely meaningful. Her fingers brushed against one of the carvings, and a sudden warmth pulsed through her skin. A memory not hers flashed through her mind. Hands carving those very symbols. A voice chanting softly. A promise being made. Fazza pulled her hand back sharply, her breath catching. "This isn't just a place," she murmured. "It's a story." And she was part of it. She stepped inside. The air changed instantly, cooler, heavier, filled with a silence that felt sacred rather than empty. The passage led downward, each step echoing softly against the stone. The deeper she went, the stronger that presence became. Then, at the end of the corridor, she found it. A chamber. Wide and circular, its walls covered in the same symbols she had seen outside. But in the center, there was something else. A stone pedestal. And on it, resting as if untouched by time, was a small, sealed object wrapped in fabric that shimmered faintly under the dim light. Fazza approached slowly, her heartbeat loud in her ears. "You were meant to find it?" The voice. Clear. Undeniable. Not just in her mind this time but in the space around her. Fazza turned quickly. And there she stood. The woman from her vision. She was real, or at least, she looked real. Her veil moved slightly, though there was no wind. Her presence was calm, yet powerful, like the desert itself given human form. "Who are you?" Fazza asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman stepped closer, her eyes meeting Fazza's with an intensity that felt both familiar and overwhelming. "I am what remains," she said softly. "And you, are what continues." Fazza shook her head slightly, trying to understand. "I don't know what that means." "You will." The woman gestured toward the pedestal. "That is the secret. The one written in the winds, carried through time, protected by silence." Fazza looked back at the object. "Why me?" The woman's gaze softened. "Because you listened." A silence followed, not empty, but full of meaning. Fazza reached out slowly, her fingers trembling as they touched the fabric. The moment she did, the chamber seemed to breathe. The walls hummed faintly, the symbols glowing softly as if awakening after a long sleep. She unwrapped the object. Inside, was not gold, not jewels, not power in any form she had expected. It was a journal. Old. Fragile. Yet untouched by decay. Fazza opened it carefully. The pages were filled with writing, beautiful, flowing script. But as her eyes moved across the lines, something impossible happened. She understood it. Every word. Every sentence. It wasn't just a journal. It was a legacy. Stories of women who had come before her, guardians of something greater than kingdoms, greater than power. They had not ruled with authority, but with truth. They had carried knowledge, protected it, hidden it when the world was not ready. And now, it was her turn. Tears filled Fazza's eyes, though she didn't know why. The emotions were too deep, too vast to name. This is what I was meant to find?" she asked. The woman nodded. "The world you come from values control. But this." She placed a hand gently over the journal. "This is understanding." Fazza closed the journal slowly, holding it close to her chest. "And what happens now?" The woman smiled faintly. "Now, you choose." "Choose what?" "Whether the secret remains buried, or becomes something more." Fazza looked down, her thoughts racing. For so long, her life had been decided for her. Every step, every word, every future already written. But not this. This was hers. For the first time, the silence inside her wasn't heavy. It was clear. She looked up again, but the woman was gone. Only the soft echo of the desert remained.